Can I take over the world and become an evil genius? It hasn't been done before, but if I recruit enough minions and build a doomsday device, it might just work. Today I played 100 Days of Evil Genius 2. My evil plot began as I soared through the air in my private helicopter. I was heading to my new secret lair, which happened to be located in North America. Keep that a secret though. All of my minions had awaited my arrival and lined up for me as my helicopter touched down. One of my minions had immediately approached me as I gave them the direct order to create an inner sanctum to base all of my evil schemes out of. I then walked down from my helicopter pad to check out the abilities that I could perform with my genius. The first one was work harder, which made any jobs that needed to be done a priority job. The other one was train faster, which instantly changes a minion into the minion type that they're training to be. I noticed that there was a casino with a whole bunch of boxed up machines at the entry point of my island. It appeared that this was going to be my main distraction from my secret lair, just in case people came to investigate. I had also noticed that there were a lot of different room types I could build. Each one had its own function. I ended up coming across a tab where I could recruit regular minions. There were also a whole bunch of different type of trainable minions broken down into 3 main types. There also happened to be a giant list of all of the current minions that were working for me. I had got acquainted with these easy to use minion management menus. And that was when I discovered a giant map of the whole world. Hey look, it's the lair. After getting acquainted with the interfaces and messing around with my evil genius, I had decided it was time to start building up the secret lair. I practiced placing down a door, and right as I did, my AI assistant had said we were low on power. So I started to construct a power room. I made it very small, right next to where the casino area and my secret lair converged. I then placed 2 generators in the power room, which gave my base power. I had also placed an incinerator, which can be used to dispose of body bags, whatever that means. Sleeping areas are required to keep my minions happy, so I started building one right across from my newly planned power room. Minions also like food, like every other human. So I came up with this idea that I would connect the eating quarters and the bedrooms together. In the long run, I'm definitely going to want to connect these 2 areas together. Once I had the schematics for the sleeping area and eating quarters up, I started to place some beds. These restore morale and vitality, 2 of the 3 base stats that every single minion needs to be a good worker. I had also placed down some lockers which increase the amount of minions that I could have in my lair. In the mess hall, I added some basic food counters which restore minions' vitality and smart stats. I then added a hallway and a control room which can be used to increase broadcast strength, allowing me to have a strategic criminal network on the world map. The radio repeaters are the actual tools my minions can use to generate the broadcast strength. Once I pressed confirm, all of my minions got straight to work, mining out the rooms that I had told them to build. I then had the bright idea to sell all of the boxed up casino equipment that was not in service. Unfortunately, my simple-minded minions started to sell the equipment while we had the max amount of money we could hold. So all of the money that I had gotten from selling this equipment had gone to waste. I then utilized the speed up button during construction as it seemed appropriate. It was pretty cool being able to manipulate time with the evil invention that my scientists had come up with. That just goes to show that minions can be really good or sometimes useless. Like this one that I chose to execute because he was slacking off. This was a great example for all the other minions on what happens when you don't obey the evil mastermind. Talking about obeying the evil mastermind, go ahead and hit that subscribe button now. I command you. The radio repeaters were finally done constructing. I opened the world map and sent some of my minions to create a criminal network in 2 regions of the United States. The minions that I had assigned immediately ran to the helipad attached to my secret lair. They didn't waste any time at all and started constructing the networks as soon as possible. They must have been inspired from what happened to that previous minion. I had then sent my minions on a mission to make $75 every 5 seconds. Eureka! I had my first source of income. I knew that I needed to have a lot of funding in order to be successful with my evil plans of world domination. So I tried to build up some more radio repeaters, but didn't have enough power to maintain them. Obviously, I built more generators and waited for my gold to increase before placing more radio repeaters. There were so many side objectives that I could complete. I ended up taking one on where I had to kidnap a scientist from the world stage and interrogate them to learn their secrets. Clearly we needed some minions around here with some brains. I even had one who didn't know what shoelaces were. I also would be able to research new technologies with this scientist minion, so logically it seemed like a good minion type to start with. I didn't want my workers to get lazy, so I went into the power room that I was building and yelled at them to get it done quicker. I finally was able to add some more radio repeaters, expanded my criminal network, and then started some more evil plots to generate more revenue. While I was distracted by the minion screen, some random investigators had snuck into my base. Utilizing the red alert button, my whole secret lair locked down, and a red blinking light flooded the hallways. Since I didn't really have a lot of minions in the lair, I had to prove why I am the evil genius, and go pistol to pistol with an investigator. The second investigator was able to escape sadly, and I wasn't in the mood to go chase them down, as I am not supposed to be doing any of this grunt work. While heading back into my secret lair, another investigator was trying to sneak. My minions finally did their jobs. I didn't like how I could barely see what was going on in the fight, so I ordered the removal of one of the doors. The lair was pretty lackluster, so I needed to continue building it up. This entailed adding on to the control room and ordering some more generators so my base would have sufficient power. I wanted to make a vault in my lair so that way I didn't have all of my money scattered all over the place. I ended up drafting up a build plan for my vault in one of the most secluded parts of the lair. This would ensure that those pesky agents wouldn't be able to make it there. While making some other improvements to my base, I saw a fire extinguisher as a placeable option. It said that these are used to put out fires, obviously. I placed down a whole bunch of them because it seemed like a fire in one of my power rooms could completely shut down the whole base. This time, I didn't miss any of the investigators who were trying to sneak onto my island. I marked them to be taken care of right away. It seemed like these investigators were gonna take a while before they actually arrived into my lair. While they slowly approached, I checked the world map and saw that my criminal networks had finally expanded into Western Europe. I then threw down some more radio repeaters and built gold racks to store my money in. The lair's broadcast strength was also now 4. I could expand to 4 new regions. So I went crazy and told all of my minions to head out and start setting up criminal networks. I chose the Central Hammer Europe region, the North Hammer districts, Central Anvil provinces, and the Eastern Hammer districts. Once my gold reserves were finally starting to pile up, I decided that it was time to start building my inner sanctum. I chose a location directly across from the vault as I wanted this corner of my base to be the most secure. In the long term, it definitely makes a lot of sense to place a security room over on this side. As we progressed with kidnapping a scientist from the world stage, I knew that I needed to place down a prison. It wouldn't make sense to kidnap someone but not have a place to hold them. So I of course started to build a decent sized room to hold one prison cell as well as an interrogation chair. I initially wanted to place down 3 prison cells, but I would need a lot more generators to sustain them. It really seemed like power was going to be an issue, especially with this base being so technologically advanced. The prison finally finished constructing. I could now actually send out my minions to go and grab the scientist from the world stage. I had also realized that there were different levels of the island that I could build my secret lair into. This was pretty awesome because it guaranteed our lair would expand. The intellectual scientist had finally arrived on my island, escorted by one of my minions. Clearly he wasn't that smart though, since he got captured. Once the scientist had finally made it over to the prison, I ordered one of my minions to interrogate them. I needed to get all of the information that I could out of this scientist so we could steal their secrets and employ them ourselves. Sadly for our hostage, he couldn't handle the interrogation. So right away after it was done, he had collapsed in defeat. Now having the secrets of the science minion, I could order one to be trained. The only issue was I was missing a training room. I was also missing a scientist training station. So I ordered the construction of both. I then collected some side quest rewards and was able to build myself an impressive desk in my inner sanctum. I then expanded my vault to be even bigger and some investigators pulled up. There was a long drawn out fight and to be honest, the investigators took out a good amount of my minions. Once the investigators were handled, I personally went in to see how the training of my scientist minion was going. I used my train faster ability and instantly upgraded the minion in training. I immediately had then started to talk with my scientist. He was, quite the interesting guy, I guess you could say. He was very jolly, to say the least. I then ended up taking on another secret mission. I had to kidnap a guard and interrogate them. It seemed like that I was going to be able to unlock each minion type by interrogating people with the corresponding professions from the world stage. I didn't really realize it yet, but the laboratory room was finally unlocked. My minion could now start researching new technology once one was built. Of course, I started to get the blueprints ready and create a lab. I threw down these random research devices and started the construction as soon as possible. I didn't realize this at first, but the research equipment drained my base of power. This was super unfortunate because my base had completely shut down. All of my security doors were no longer functionable. Anybody could just mosey on in. And that's exactly what happened. There were a couple investigators who came in and took pictures of my generators. Despite having no power, I was still able to sound my red alert alarm. We had taken care of all of the intruders, and then I placed down some more generators, and the power came back on. I had then began my scheme to kidnap a guard from the world stage. As I waited for my minions to kidnap the guard, I launched another scheme that reduced the heat of my criminal network in a specific region. Apparently, there was a huge drug scandal going on, and my minions went to go preach about how that was such a big deal. This drew away a lot of attention from my criminal networks. The guard that we had captured from the world stage was being brought in from the helicopter. He was then put into a cell where I ordered his interrogation. This was a pretty large step for my evil lair. We now were able to train guards and scientists. I had also set up 2 guard and 2 scientist training sets. This would allow more guards and scientists to be trained at once. Since we were on a roll with improvements, I placed down another research whiteboard. This increases the speed of researching simple objects. With all of this commotion going on, I was pretty distracted. I didn't even realize that an investigator had snuck up right behind me and tried to assassinate me. I immediately put the whole base to red alert, and a couple minions helped me take care of this investigator. Jeez, that was a close one. Despite almost being taken out, things went on. I went over to where 2 guards were training and instantly made them finish their training with one of my special abilities. This was important to me though, because I needed to make sure there were enough guards in the base to prevent any more investigators from getting that close again. I placed down the first capacitor blueprint in my secret lair. This would prevent the power from fully going out if my generators had failed. I also started to take some precautions because I knew that more agents of justice were going to be coming to my secret lair, so putting up a couple traps or 2 would make sense. Of course, right after I was trying to take some preventive measures, 6 more investigators arrived on my island. Luckily enough, I had trained 3 more guards, so this should be interesting. The traps are working. The investigators stumbled their way into my base, and once they made it past my 2 doors, I sounded the red alert alarm. In the middle of the huge brawl that was going on in my lair, the guard side quest had completed. I got to talk one-on-one with a newly trained guard. He really wasn't the brightest. I had then bumped into another issue of a lot of the objects in my lair being used, but their condition wasn't being fixed. So I got the new quest of kidnapping a technician to repair all of the objects. Some of my research had also completed, so I immediately ordered the research of reinforced doors. I somehow didn't notice it, but the power supply in my base was down to 0. Thankfully the power didn't go down, but I didn't have any to spare. There was no way that we were going to expand with 0 spare power. I ended up making one of my power rooms a lot bigger and adding 2 more generators to be built in it. That was when my research on reinforced doors had finished. I ended up choosing nuclear generators as our next targeted research, just because we needed a lot more power in the base. It was also time to take matters into my own hands. I ordered the construction of a security room that had a security desk which monitors up to 3 cameras that I could place throughout my base. The technician had finally arrived, and we interrogated him. I was definitely distracted by this interrogation and building a new training set for technicians because 2 assassins out of nowhere came up behind me and tried to assassinate me once again. This was not looking good, as I was in a 2v1. Luckily enough, all of my guards had run in to help, and things were taken care of. This was the 2nd assassination attempt on my life. I guess it comes with the line of work. My technician had also finished their training, so we were able to now train technicians. And yet another assassination attempt. I'm not gonna go out that easily, guys. I was super hyped because my research on nuclear generators had finished. It made sense to replace all of my current generators with nuclear ones as we got a lot more power output from them. It was time to start getting my casino operation up and running. The only issue is I needed people to run it. So I ended up kidnapping and training some valets. They would be a great distraction for any investigators who try to pay us a visit. I then felt that I needed a worthy apprentice to cater to my every need. I sent out my minions to go and look for a henchman around the world. I really hope that they come back with some suitable candidates. With all of this going on, I didn't even realize that I had unlocked some more casino items. So I expanded the casino and threw down some of these new tables and stages for my valets to distract the tourist with. I had then put up a camera near my entrance to the lair, so that way when the forces of justice break in, my guards in the security room will get notified immediately. The control panel research had complete, and I created an archive and infirmary to restore my minions' smarts and vitality. After that, we handled some more intruders. I got to see the minions heal at the healing station, which was pretty cool. The control panels got added into the lair's control room, which unlocked intel. Intel is used to instantly complete certain schemes and is required to start some others. I immediately used some of that intel that I unlocked to reduce the heat of an area and start a scheme to recruit my very first henchman. In the meantime, I was also researching Crime Network's level 2. That was when my very first henchman, Juby, had arrived at my secret lair. He told me he had worked for a couple other evil geniuses and wasn't very hopeful about me. This was a little bit irritating, but as long as he vowed to protect me and do my bidding, I didn't care. While I was talking with one of my loyal subjects, I had a great idea out of nowhere. I wanted to go into politics. This seemed like a really good way to expand my influence around the world. I had also realized that I needed to get some more military-type troops. So I started a quest to unlock the mercenary minion type. I had then focused on Juby's abilities. These included a teleport and a weapon buff. I could already tell that he's going to be a perfect henchman because these are both very useful. I knew that it was necessary to get a head start into getting into politics. So I invited a whole bunch of political aides to my casino. Little did they know I actually planned on kidnapping them and interrogating them. You could definitely say this gave me an unfair advantage of getting into politics. My excitement had only further increased because I had unlocked a new laser beam wall. This was going to be awesome to watch, at least for me, not for those pesky investigators. I was able to complete my quest of kidnapping a mercenary and training one of my own. These guys sure did look intimidating. Since I had just unlocked a new muscle minion, I wanted to unlock a new science minion. I focused in on kidnapping a biologist and interrogating them. I had then continued to try and use my political influence to buy a country. Sadly enough, no country would allow me to buy them. I wasn't gonna take no for an answer though. So I plotted to build a doomsday device that would make me the ruler of the world. I was able to successfully kidnap a biologist, and I just needed to build a training station for them now. I had also started to watch one of my mercenaries train. This was pretty cool. The usual problem occurred of not having enough power, so I built a new power room. I had a brief conversation with one of my valets. She had told me about the socialite minion type. These minions specialized in distracting secret agents when they come to investigate the lair. So sure enough, I started my plot of kidnapping a socialite and interrogating them for their information and secrets. To get the information I needed to build my doomsday device, interrogations of agents from all of the different justice corporations took place, and I had to research some very specific technologies. It definitely seemed like we were going to have to prepare for a lot of resistance. So at the entrance of my lair, I made it a lot more secure with traps, and I even expanded the hallway. My final plan for my doomsday device was complete. I decided that I would call it Midas, and it would turn everybody in the whole world into gold. Well, at least the people I didn't like. This was definitely going to become our main priority. The sooner that I got this thing built, the sooner we could take out countries. I really didn't want to stop unlocking new minion types though to focus on my doomsday device. So I was doing both in parallel. I had taken on the quest of successfully training a spin doctor. I had also now unlocked safe racks, which could hold a lot more gold in them. I also unlocked staircases. This would allow me to go between levels in my secret lair. Unfortunately, I didn't have the technology to dig through certain layers of rocks. so I couldn't place down any staircases yet. In order to secure the parts that I needed for my doomsday device, I needed to upgrade some criminal networks to the 2nd level. This way, I would be able to locate the pieces needed and extract them. As usual, some investigators arrived at my lair while I was building it up. On the bright side, the new slot machines I added to the casino were making me a decent amount of money and distracting investigators. I needed 30 science minions to work on the Midas device, so I got training away. It also appeared that there were some enemy soldiers attacking my base, not only investigators. This was a little bit scary because they seemed very well equipped, and also they were a lot tankier than the other investigators. Once the soldiers were visible by my camera, my henchmen as well as a whole bunch of guards rushed over to take them on. There were only 4 of them, but they put up a very good fight. Once I had enough science minions trained, I got the task to dig an entrance to the Doomsday Cavern, where my doomsday device was going to be stationed. This of course went super quick, and was very easy to do. The Midas device was finally built, but it seemed like it drained a lot of power. The whole secret lair had run out of power just when I tried to launch it. I was definitely gonna need a bigger power supply. What about atomic particles? I had my minions head out as they started looking for atomic particles throughout the world. I was so excited to launch this doomsday device that I was giving a speech to my one henchman about how we were going to rule this world. Rudely enough, I was informed that my research on mining tougher rocks was completed. This was a good thing, but why did it have to be in the middle of my speech? My minions were scattered out all across the world, collecting the atomic particles. We were at around 4 out of 5 when I started to get attacked by a whole bunch of enemy investigators. But sure enough, my last minion had delivered the atomic particle that we needed. It was finally time to launch the Midas device. The agents of justice made their last-ditch effort to try and stop it, but I had made my way over to the device itself and launched it at the Western Patriot region at level 3. A 1-minute countdown had occurred. We needed to defend the base up until the launch. Thankfully enough, I had already taken out the investigators that landed on my island. I had noticed that the Western Patriot region had completely gone into lockdown. I guess half of their citizens did just turn into gold. That was awesome, let's do it again. I was a little bit annoyed with myself though because I didn't go watch the Midas device fire off from the very top of my island. I guess in the future we'll be able to shoot this thing off a lot on the higher powers. All that really mattered is that this thing was working, and it was working decently well. At least I thought it was working pretty well. That was until a scientist had come up to me and told me that the Midas device was actually on fire. We had put it out pretty quickly, but now all of the forces of justice had also noticed that we had just shot a mega weapon from our secret island. So now we're no longer really a secret. I was definitely a bit concerned for what was yet to come. All of the forces of justice were definitely going to make their way over to my island. There was already a couple assassination attempts on my life, and we had just launched the device. The forces of justice were sending everything they could at us. We had never seen some of these unit types before, but I had so many minions that we were able to outnumber them and take out any enemies that made their way in. You know things are serious when a secret agent made his way into our hideout. He was overall really powerful by himself, but he had a little detachment of investigators with him. My minions had completely surrounded the corridor that he was being fought off in. Surprisingly enough, he was handling himself quite well. I also later on recovered some information that his name was Agent X. He was a pretty well-known Patriot investigator who had quite the reputation. After quite a while of fighting him off and having some more investigators show up at the lair, Agent X had vanished. I thought that we had defeated him, but he had just disappeared into thin air. He clearly couldn't handle all of my minions that were attacking him, so this was his only escape. I guess we'll be seeing Agent X later. Once we finally got a little bit of a break, I started to place down some fake schematics for the Midas. I knew more investigators were going to be making their way into the hideout and trying to steal the plans on how to disable the Midas. Providing these fake schematics was a perfect way to throw off these agents of justice. While I was waiting for some investigators to steal my fake schematics, I had unlocked guard posts. I then began some new research. That was when those pesky investigators started to make their way into my lair. Sure enough, one of them got caught in my laser beams, but they were still able to steal the fake schematics while thinking that we didn't even notice. With the fake Midas schematics being in the hands of the forces of justice, I was now able to continue my evil schemes. My first course of action was to kidnap notable engineers from around the world so they could start making some improvements on the Midas device. Waiting for these engineers to arrive and actually start work, I fended off waves of enemy investigators as expected. I then placed down some melee staff stations right next to my pistol stations. I also needed some more broadcast strength, so I added in a new control room with radio repeaters. It really seemed like every other second I was unlocking a new research. My scientists were super effective, especially with the nice lab that I had built them. The notable engineers had arrived in my lair and made the improvements and fixes on the Midas device. It was now running normally with no issues. A very interesting scenario had come up. A bunch of VIPs around the world were suddenly falling ill and dying. It was clear that they were being poisoned. So I needed to send out my minions to go investigate what was going on, because this wasn't my doing. I also felt like I could count out the forces of justice. They wouldn't be killing random people, especially very important people around the world. The lair was expanding, so it only made sense to expand our security room. I ended up building a brand new one. It was a lot bigger and it could hold so many more guards than the last one could. Since the jail was also now built into the security room, I was able to destroy the old one and replace it with a new room. I ended up making so many more improvements to the lair. I made the mess hall a lot bigger as we had more minions, and even improved the vault. That was when the usual group of investigators had made their way into my lair. As usual, my minions had taken out the enemies in the snap of a finger. I really needed to improve my security, because after those investigators had broken in, the VIP killer made their way into my base. They low-key threatened me, but also had admiration for us as we were able to discover that she was the killer. She had kinda just snuck away, and we let bygones be bygones. Since the whole VIP killer situation was taken care of, I could now focus in on getting the karate minion type. After doing an interrogation and setting up a training set for the karate minion type, I was able to go in and instantly train one. This muscle minion was very unique, as they were the weapon. My evil minion military was almost complete. I had minions that could cause damage with big guns. I had minions that were very tactical with their hands. I just needed someone who could sneak around now. So I went out into the world stage and found myself a hitman. We interrogated them, and then I trained one of my very own. I favored the muscle minions over every other type of minion. It was time I started paying attention to the science minions as well as the social minions. So I interrogated and unlocked the quantum chemist as well as the counter agent. The quantum chemist obviously does chemistry, and the counter agent was very good at detecting disguises. I had now unlocked all of the different minion types, and that was when a random lady named Tamara Krast arrived in my lair. I completely didn't recognize her. She was the lady who had kicked me out of my own corporation and had taken it over. It was clear that whatever she was here for now was in spite to take me down. This became even more clear when she had mentioned that she was paying the agents of justice to come out and investigate my secret lair. Nothing can ever be easy. I wasn't gonna let these agents discover any evil schemes that were going on inside of my base. So I let them plant listening devices. This might seem very contradictory, especially since I was taking out the people who were planting those listening devices. The thing was, I was gonna remove them and clear any evidence of anything ever evil that happened inside of this secret lair. Krast ended up being furious as nothing had come back to her. She wasn't able to get her hands on any evidence of us doing any evil deeds in that secret lair. It was the best feeling ever when I got to see the furious look on her face. She even had a mini tantrum right in front of me. Of course, right when I thought I was done dealing with Krast, she had sent over some protesters to protest my lair. So I did what any logical evil genius would do and brainwashed them. If the protesters that she had sent out had actually returned to her saying that there was nothing going on in this lair, she would be furious once again. And I'm sure she would even take to more extreme measures, which would justify me taking her out. While all of this brainwashing was going on, I had also started to invite some board members of the world stage to come and chat with me. Surely I don't plan on brainwashing them too. At this point, it seemed like all of the enemies that the forces of justice had were being thrown at us. There were groups of soldiers after soldiers being sent to my lair. Thankfully enough, I had the means to take care of them. I guess that's how a brainwashing happens. All of the board members that I had invited to my secret meeting had arrived. I surely didn't force them to come. It was official. I was holding a board meeting in my very own secret lair, and all of the board members had happened to attend. While all of this was going on, I had my minions head out to kidnap a very prominent scientist. After telling the board complete BS, they were back on my side. Krast's plan of taking me out was definitely falling apart right in front of her. The prominent scientist that my minions headed out to kidnap had finally arrived in the lair. His name was Nigel, and he agreed to build me a new power supply for the Midas project. Well, I guess he didn't really agree. He didn't really have any other choice. Nigel coming to the lair must have been a sign of good luck. We had just finished researching the new fusion generators. These things had a lot more power than the nuclear generators, and I started constructing as many of them that I could. While I was distracted by my generators, a super agent named Symmetry had snuck into my lair. I quickly caught her before she could cause any real damage. I sounded red alert, and all of my minions that were in the area started to head over. They did their job and took her out after quite a while of fighting. These super agents really are pesky. Even though we already had a very good research program, I decided that I should expand the current research area, building more science devices. I was losing quite a lot of guards from the enemies that were sneaking into my base. So I decided that I could make my secret lair a little bit more friendly to the forces of justice. I expanded the hallway at the entrance of my secret lair. I had then put a whole bunch of laser beams, which should hopefully be able to take out most of the enemies who get in. Time to watch this thing in action. Some investigators had made it into my base. They snuck past my first set of laser beams, but got caught in the second ones. They immediately were fried, and they were completely disorientated. My guards were able to get an edge on them and start attacking them right after they were just burned by the laser beams. Well, this is going to be an easy defense. Things were going pretty awesome inside the lair. I had now unlocked a rifle rack. My guards could use these rifles while protecting the base. This is definitely going to be overpowered. I would not want to mess with them. Thankfully, they're working on our side. We had finally unlocked the technology to expand to the different layers of our base. So I placed down a staircase, and it finally connected to the second level. It even connected to the third level, which was pretty cool. I constructed my very first hallway on the second level of our base. The whole point of having to expand to the second level was to connect to the Midas project higher up. That's exactly what I started to do. I built hallways leading to the Midas project on the second level. Right as we had gained access to Midas on level 2, we just needed to wait for Krast to pull up. Wow, now that is cool. In place of Krast not showing up, it looked like a super agent arrived instead. There were also some other investigators who started to come to the front of the island. The super agent that we were dealing with was named Agent Steel, and they were taking out a lot of my minions with one single bullet. I didn't really know what to do, so I sent my henchman in to go and help out the minions. Hopefully this works out. My henchman had been shot once, and he had immediately taken 100 damage. Now that was just insane. I didn't know if we were going to be able to take out this agent, and I was hoping that the guards when they arrive would be enough to overwhelm her. I guess we'll find out. Surely enough, we got the deed done, and I had decided that it made sense to build some rooms on the second level of the secret lair. I wasn't properly using that level. I ended up constructing a huge vault. I knew that there weren't going to be any enemies that were entering the base from this level, so it only made sense to have a vault on this layer. Right across from the vault, I had then built a power room. I knew that we had quite a few power rooms, but I wanted to make sure that we would never run out of power. One that size definitely should be capable of it. I don't know what was so attractive about my lair, but a huge group of soldiers had arrived trying to take on my base. I kind of just sent my troops over to do their thing and then built more generators. I also might have accidentally kidnapped Krast. Well, you know, since she's here, we might as well brainwash her too. I have been waiting for this moment for a very, very long time. Krast was finally on my side. Wait, what the heck is that? Without getting any time to celebrate, one of my power rooms was completely ablaze. I had taken a closer look, and noticed that there were some enemy sabotagers sneaking around. They must have been the ones to throw the bombs and set all of this equipment on fire. There was no way that just some regular sabotagers were able to deal this much damage. I decided to take a closer look at things and saw that there was a super agent named Wrecking Bola who was in charge of that group. This makes a lot more sense. I rushed as many minions as well as my henchmen over to take this super agent out. It seemed like they weren't that dangerous, but the explosions were definitely annoying. After what felt like an eternity, Wrecking Bola was defeated. It was now time to put out all of the blazing fires. I had already lost some radio repeaters, and I didn't want to lose any more. I'm glad all of that's over with. Wait, what? Are you serious? More soldiers had made their way into my base. They made it to my trap hallway, and that's when they were taking a lot of damage from my laser beams. Unfortunately, Juby had also got caught inside of the laser beams, so he was taking a decent amount of damage from them, but luckily, it wasn't enough to really kill him. After handling all of those intruders, I started to build a brand new infirmary. I noticed that I was coming down with some kind of cold, so this should hopefully help. Being an evil genius and being sick at the same time is not an easy task. I sent my minions out to steal some famous paintings from museums around the world. Weirdly enough, this painting thief named Clara Jones had showed up in my lair. I don't know how she even found my lair, but she was challenging me to a painting stealing contest. She said that she could steal a lot more paintings before I could. Obviously, I wasn't going to let her make these claims and prove it. So the competition was on, and I sent minions out all over the world to steal paintings. I also further expanded my security room. It now had 2 huge guard tables in it, and I planned on connecting it to a new area that I was building in the back side of my base. Now this is a convenient blueprint. The whole layer is now connected full circle. Randomly enough, Wrecking Bola had returned to my lair, and I had to deal with her once again. Her assault began on a very unconventional side. Right next to where everybody comes up at the helicopter, her troops started to attack my minions. I had also noticed that there were some soldiers who were trying to enter my base. So this was a 2-front assault. Wrecking Bola was on one side, and a whole bunch of soldiers with guns and an RPG were on the other. I'm not gonna lie, I wish I could say it was easy to take out all of these enemies, but it truly wasn't. These guys put up an insanely good fight, and I had lost quite a few minions. Luckily enough, we were able to take out all of the enemies, and they weren't even able to shoot off their RPG one time. I decided that it was time to get my ultimate revenge on Krast. She was no longer useful, so I turned her into gold and put her on display. I had finally defeated my biggest rival. Despite being defeated, Krast was still haunting me in the afterlife. She apparently had a whole bunch of secrets on a data device that we didn't have access into. So I ordered my minions to try and crack it. Let's hope that doesn't take long. Krast's data drive had provided me with information that she was working on some kind of mysterious project. We didn't know what it was, but there were locations to a whole bunch of black sites on the data drive. It only made sense to go and explore them and try and figure out what was going on. Before I did this though, I wanted to make sure I set up a whole bunch of traps, because if we were raiding black sites, I'm assuming we're going to receive a lot of resistance. I had gotten a little too preoccupied trying to raid the black sites that I didn't even notice a giant fire had broken out in my lair. Kinda like the very first big fire, a whole bunch of sabotagers were making their way through my radio repeaters. They were continuously throwing bombs at them, causing the fire to get even bigger and bigger. My minions had taken them out, but at what cost? A lot of the equipment was damaged inside of my radio rooms, and that was when I noticed even more enemies were approaching my lair. This was getting a little bit ridiculous. It was time to expand my locker area just so that way I could have more minions in the base defending it. After fighting off wave after wave after wave of enemies, I had unlocked a shark tank trap. Now these look like they're going to be fun to use. It didn't take long for our very first victim to arrive at the trap. They immediately had just fallen into the water and the shark started to attack them. Surprisingly enough, they had survived and made their way out of the tank. Well, she didn't last long. As I wrapped up my last black site raid, one of my scientists had informed me that the Midas device needed some kind of monitoring. I honestly really didn't care the reason of why we needed it. I'm an evil genius, I just want things to get done. So I sent some minions out to go and find the monitoring devices for the Midas. I also went to the lab to yell at the science minions to get their jobs done. While all of this was going on, I had expanded to the 3rd level of my canyon. This way, I could see the 3rd level of the Midas device. I can only imagine what it's gonna look like. Big and shiny. Midas level 3 was completed. Wow, that looks magnificent. Let's not waste any time at all and fire it off already. So that's exactly what I did. I aimed it at the central hammer districts in Europe and started the countdown to launch. It looked like a few investigators happened to be in my base and started running out as I had started my launch. That's not a good thing. The Midas had launched successfully. It turned a good majority of the population in that region into gold. I sent my helicopters over with a bunch of minions to go and collect all of the new gold statues that were in the region. It looked like that first launch alone had attracted a super agent. I'm gonna hate to see what this second launch attracts. I guess I'll worry about that when the time comes. With the Midas device advancing and my science slowing down, I decided to build a new laboratory on the 2nd floor. This one was humongous. I had realized that I did not complete the objective that I wanted, so I had to shoot off the Midas one more time, and this time I shot it at the right location. I honestly felt like a fool that I had shot the wrong area in Europe. At the same time though, I didn't really care. More gold for me. It felt like it was taking forever, but I started to make good progress in remodeling the laboratory. I had to take all of the old devices out of the old one and move it to here, the new one. I also had to order quite a few more science devices. Honestly though, this was the least of my worries. I had been informed that 40 agents were being sent to invade my lair. Now this was going to be challenging. Thankfully enough though, I found out that not all of the 40 agents were going to arrive at the same time. A group of around 20 enemies did show up at the door closest to my helipad. This wasn't a few investigators anymore, this was an all-out war. I sounded the red alert alarm and all of my minions started to head over to the area where the enemies were invading from. I then teleported my henchmen behind the large group of enemies. This was pretty game-changing because I was able to distract 3 of the enemy soldiers all at the same time. The rest of my minions had moved in to do their jobs. Now that's what I call a battle. It was clear that we were going to be facing a lot harsher resistance from now going forward. I ended up remodeling the old laboratory room into a new training room. I could now train a whole bunch more minions all at the same time. After taking out the 40 agents who decided to try and take on my lair, I had talked to one of my minions. They had informed me of some very bad news. Apparently, all of the minions that I had sent to go collect the gold statues rebelled against me. They had taken the statues for themselves and said that they wanted no part in my operations anymore. They had claimed that it was getting out of hand. Well, in my opinion, the only thing getting out of hand is their rebellion. They're gonna pay for their insolence. It became clear to me that I only had 2 goals. Fight off all of these agents who were attacking my lair, and destroy every single little piece of the rebellion. Wow, these super agents couldn't be any more annoying. Well, that's just great. After dealing with one super agent thinking the coast was clear, I had run into another. When I said the enemy resistance was really stepping it up, I was not joking. Once things had calmed down at the lair, I had sent a whole bunch of minions out to take out the Rebellion's TV network, beat Claire Jones at the painting stealing competition, and finish destroying the Rebellion's laboratory and garrison. I then started to train as many minions as I could. The reason being is I needed to plan one last assault to take this rebellion out for good. The result ended up devastating the rebellion so much, they had sent their very last troops over to attack my lair. This was basically like the cherry on top because the rebellion was pretty much asking for its own doom. I did it! I suppressed the rebellion right where it started. It appeared that they were no longer a concern, and I could now focus on dealing with the forces of justice. I planned on doing that by luring their politicians into my lair and taking care of them, if you know what I mean. It wasn't long until all 5 politicians, the leaders of the world, had made their way into my lair. They had willingly come here because they thought there was a meeting going on. Well, that was far from the truth. They arrived to meet their doom. If you enjoy my content and want to get further involved in the community, join my Discord, link down below.